Thursday, January 11th, 2023. And ask for approval of the minutes from December 14th. I don't know if anybody,
I'll make a motion to approve.
well, before that, one of the things I wanted to make a couple of comments. One is that the approval of the pension applications, it does list the people's names, their ages, and the amount they're collecting per month. And I don't think that's traditionally what we do. Right? We don't, certainly somebody, Nancy Stewart might not want everybody to know that she's 67. So anyways, because of that, I think that we should strike from the minutes the fact that they have the names, the ages, and the names are fine, but not the ages and the amount that they receive. Would you guys agree with that?
I don't have a problem with it. I do think we've always done that, though.
I don't think we've had their ages. I might be wrong, but
I'm going back to look right now. Let's see if we got any applications here.
what we get is information, we get that, but in the minutes.
Oh, in the minutes, yeah, okay, yeah.
in
You're
the
talking about
minutes,
just the minutes?
Yeah, I'm talking
Yeah,
about correcting the minutes.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's, okay, so we would take that out of the minutes. And the only other word is at the end when Mr. Perro moved to $3 million, PIMCO is spelled wrong, but that's not a big deal. But anyway, so if we removed Lawrence Taylor's name and his payout, and also not his name, but his payout, his age is not in there, and Nancy Stewart's age and payout. If that's agreement, is there a second to that, to accept the minutes as altered?
I made the motion, so I think somebody else needs to second it.
Rich, you want to second that? Or I'll second.
Yeah, second.
Okay, all in favor?
All right,
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent, thank you. Is there any public comment? There's no public comment. We'll move on to approval of the pension applications. Jerry, you up there? There's actually one application. Oh, plural. Jerry?
I don't see Jerry.
I don't see Jerry. Okay, we're gonna table that till Jerry's in with us, and we can go on to global equity long short discussion. To do that, we're gonna go into executive session. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So I guess we will,
There's an alternative
Close
link
this
for that?
yes.
Chitsame circulated a second.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So we will, I guess, suspend this portion of the meeting right now to go into executive session.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Okay, so I will meet everybody back in the executive session in a few minutes.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
We can work with Empower.
Chitsame, do you think that we should ever talk to Northern Trust, or is everything is just running smooth and fine there?
What will we talk to them about? I know that they are our custodian. We do everything in-house regarding pension payments. They just hold the fund for us. They're the custodian for the fund, and they do assist us in some of the transaction if the board approves, for redemptions or purchases. So we do go through Northern Trust that way.
Frank, we have had Northern Trust in the past, and certainly are welcome to have them in again. I think it is good to, like you do with your managers, to have them in periodically to ask questions, make sure that the services provided are meeting everyone's expectations. So we can certainly add that to the list for this year.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't know whether, I'm happy to hear that Chitsame is satisfied with them. That's what the impression I get. And she's the one who deals with them. But yeah, I remember we have had them in the past a few times, so.
Okay, yeah, we could definitely
Yep.
organize that to get them in the Zoom meeting or in person. I remember they did come when I first started here, that they did come and present, so, okay, we'll do that.
Have we ever bid the custodian business?
Not since I've been working with Norwalk.
Maybe it's a big project. I don't know if we want to do it, but it's, I don't know if we're, I guess from a fiduciary standpoint, make sure we're getting the good fees.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of a commodity business anymore, but
Yeah, one thing we could do is we do have a trust and custodian specialty group at Cowan. And they get into the deep dark corners of these custodian banks. And, I think a general fee check, after we meet with Northern Trust, we can certainly opine on and make sure that it's reasonable and in line with the industry.
Callan interacts with Northern, BNY Mellon, like all of the custodians. Okay.
Yep, and they do huge projects for really complicated asset pools that might be managing hedge funds internally, private equity internally. It really runs the gamut. But they certainly have a good broad knowledge of fees in general and what is reasonable.
Yeah, my
makes-
only questions regarding custodial services would be, are we getting good service? And it sounds like Chitsame is happy with that. And are we getting competitive fees? That's it. So I'm not sure we need to hear from Northern if Chitsame is happy. I would be interested in making sure we're getting good fees though.
Right, the fees are important, but Rich, I thought you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was thinking that it might make sense to hear about the Callan presentation on custodians and fees, and then we can decide whether we need to do anything based off of that. If Chisame is happy with Northern Trust and their fees are competitive, we can, it could save the board time, could save Northern Trust time, and
Yeah, I agree.
it could save
Yep.
Chisame's time.
That's,
If
no,
that's
that's,
the way to go.
yeah, that's an excellent point. So I guess, how do we, Chitsame, do you have could you report to the board basically on the fees that Northern Trust charges us? And then we could get,
Yeah, it might
Well-
make sense for Chitsame and I to gather the details from Northern
Yeah.
Trust. Let me circulate it internally at Callan, and we can come back at a future meeting and it won't be, anything crazy in depth. I think it would be more of a general market check.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
one's
I
looking
think that
for,
makes a lot of sense.
no one's
Okay.
looking for a big science project. We're just, are the fees competitive and is the service meeting up to standard? That's it.
right, if the
Understood,
fees
yeah.
if the fees are in line and Chitsame's happy, I tell my wife a happy Chitsame, a happy meeting. So anyways,
sounds
with
like a
that,
great
this,
plan. So we'll add those to the
Yeah.
work plan.
Now that Frank is warmed up, you need any money, Chitsame?
No, thanks to Frank last month, we redeem 6 million from our pension fund and another 6 million from the OPEB fund. So I am good with cash for the first quarter of the year for pension and for half of the year for OPEB.
Frank has a
That's good.
reputation as being a real sugar daddy, so.
yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else, Britt, we could go on to the performance review.
That sounds great. So we have the performance ending November 30th. I'll start on page 3, showing the asset allocation. November was a much better month. We saw both equities and fixed income produce positive returns. Equities were also up in October and continue to be year to date. If you recall, we have seen a pretty significant rotation from growth into value, and that has continued throughout the end of 2022. But given that, you can see that the equity exposure slightly under target, about 68% versus 69%. I think most of that underweight is really an international equity, as we've seen US predominantly outperform international markets. The Artisan Fund transition is in process. We'll continue to keep the board updated as we solidify a date of that transition once the paperwork is all done. And Blackstone, I mentioned this earlier, the second piece of the redemption, about 4.9 million, will hit before the end of January. So that will help the cash position to pay benefits. You'll see domestic fixed income underweight given the interest rate environment that we've seen. And then PIMCO continues to be overweight. So total assets about 472 million. We saw about 2.4 million go out to pay benefits and about 23.7 million in investment gains for the month. On page 4, in terms of performance, fiscal year to date, we have seen equity markets certainly bounce back, especially in October and November. The fourth quarter in general was very positive for public equities. LSV, very deep value, contrarian manager, really high quality businesses with strong cash flows. You can see over the last 12 months, they've performed extremely well, up over 13% over the Russell 2000 Value Index. So great to see them doing well. Columbus Circle has underperformed a little bit over the last 12 months, but their longer term performance continues to be very strong. We saw Artisan outperform. They have a little bit more of a quality bias, growth at a reasonable price, and they've been out of favor for a long time. But good to see them outperform. Silchester underperformed long term. They continue to be very strong. I think most of that underperformance was given some of their country selection. And they did have a slight allocation to US equities, which in November, international and emerging markets outperform, or excuse me, not November, in the fourth quarter, we've seen international equities pick up a little bit, but no concerns on that front.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but Silchester actually get a flash report today. And for the month, this is gross, but their fees are like basically 55 basis points or 60 basis points for the money we have. And they were up for the month, they were up 2.6% versus the index are up 0.1%. And year to date, they're down 5.4% versus 14.5%. So they've done quite well.
Yeah, they've done great. And those reports benchmark to the MSCI EFA, not the EFA value. So there is a slight difference here, but they've been performing great and certainly no issues with Silchester.
Right. And that's thanks to Rich, because he was the one who he suggested we add money to them. So good call, Rich.
Even a blind squirrel.
Moving on, we've discussed global equity long short. They've eked out slightly positive returns fiscal year to date, but performance continues to struggle versus both the hedge fund index and their public equity benchmarks. Private equity, 99% of Norwalk's exposure is through the US Select 2014 fund, which this is only one quarter of returns, and we probably will see marks come in slightly negative as they catch up to the public markets, but good to see the US Select fund with a positive return. And then lastly, on the last page here, page 5, given this interest rate environment, fixed income managers have underperformed, particularly Metropolitan West, which is a core plus fixed income fund. So they are taking exposures outside of just the Treasury laden aggregate index and For the most part, we've seen those high-risk sectors underperform in this volatile market environment, but broadly, no concerns there, and longer term, both funds are performing in line with expectations. UBS has had a strong year and strong 3 and 5 years as they produced positive 4% return in a broadly negative 2022. So that was good to see from them. And then finally, PIMCO, your real assets fund, has done well fiscal year to date, and longer term continues to do well. So fiscal year, good to see positive returns again after a rough year and a half, up about 3.9%, about 20 basis points above the benchmark. Longer term returns continue to be in line with expectations.
It looks like UBS is headed for one of their worst performances in a long time unless things turn around. This is the 39 basis points is what, 5 months, right? July, August, right?
Yep.
So even if they double that, they're going to be under 100 basis points. Okay. All right.
Jitsume, do you know when we have we have a cash position, say, of $5 million? I mean, I know myself, I've recently bought the 4-week bill, and stuff like that. Do you know, does Northern Trust pay interest or much interest on the money that we have there? And if they're not paying much, should we, you can anticipate that we're not going to need this money, say, until March. Could we, buy a T-bill paying 4%? I don't know what
We can ask Northern Trust what their cash fund options are. We
Right.
typically don't advise clients on buying individual bonds or T-bills. But the money market fund that the cash is in is generating some return, obviously not a ton, but why don't we try to collect what is available to the pension plan to see what makes sense and if there are any other more viable options out there.
Okay,
That was
anything
good.
else? Britt, do you have anything else on this performance?
That's it for
Anybody
me.
have any questions for Britt? And if not, is anybody have a motion for adjournment?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor?
Second, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. Next, we're going to go on to defined contribution. I would like to call the meeting of the defined contribution plan for the city of Norwalk and ask for approval of the minutes from the October 12th, 2022 meeting. I looked them
Motion to
over.
approve.
Yep, I looked them over. They seem fine. Second, all in
Second,
favor?
second, all in favor, aye.
Excellent. Any public comment? No public comment. We'll move on to performance review. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. So I'll start on page 9 of the DC Plan Performance Report. This is, wait a second, mine says as of June 30th, which is not correct.
Okay.
Did I send the board the wrong report?
I have a DC plan September 30th.
You do.
Yeah, I'm looking at June 30th.
Bear with me here. Sorry about this.
That's all right. Just pull it up and share your screen.
Right. The September 30th it's like the 98 page.
Yes, that should be the one. I think I have.
Yeah, yeah.
One.
I have September.
Okay, let me look at my file again.
Okay. Yep, I just had the wrong one up. My apologies. Do you want me to share my screen, Jim?
No, I got it.
I'm
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Great. So on page 9, For the 401A plan, total assets about 10.3 million as of September 30th. You can see the target date funds representing about 89% of that, which is really the default for participants if they're not making any investment choices themselves. If we turn to page 12, seeing how the asset allocation looks versus new participant contributions, you can see broadly in line with the asset allocation, the majority of new contributions going to those target date funds, which we view favorably as they're diversified and de-risk as participants get closer to retirement. And you can see in the bottom two charts on page 12, where are assets going quarter to quarter, and on the very bottom chart in terms of contributions. And broadly, participants are really sticking to where they're putting their money to work, which is good. On page 14, the 457 plan, total assets about 40.3 million. This plan's a voluntary plan, so the 401A is really meant as the predominant retirement vehicle for new employees, whereas this plan is a voluntary plan, and really you're going to see a more mature plan. So participants are going to be more heavily favored to stable value, really less volatile investment options. And you can see target date funds still about 67%, but at the bottom there, stable value representing about 7% of assets. If we turn ahead to page 17, looking at those same charts where the asset allocation is versus contributions, and you can see much more diversified in terms of where participants are putting their money to work. About 30%, 31% of new contributions going to that Invesco Stable Value Fund. In terms of performance, on page 19 for the target date funds, you can see broadly negative return environment. This is the third quarters where we saw significant Fed interest rate hikes, volatility within equities, certain turmoil in Europe given the Ukraine invasion. But broadly versus both their indexes and peers, the Capital Group target date funds continue to perform very well. You'll see some slight underperformance in the near vintage funds. So the 2015 to the 2025 funds, and most of that is really under the hood. Some of the stock selection within the funds underlying the glide path underperformed in US equities. But longer vintage funds, you can see significant outperformance versus their benchmarks, and the peer rankings, which is the small number in between the columns, was very strong for the quarter. And longer term, really across the board, the series has performed very well. In terms of individual options on page 20, we have the index options, the passive funds up top, all performing in line with expectations, tracking their benchmarks. You'll see, given the volatility, the BlackRock International Equity Index did have some tracking error, which was largely driven by fair value pricing at the end of the quarter. But longer term, that is smoothed out. No real concerns. We did see heightened tracking error from index funds, certainly international index funds, during the first 2/3 of 2022. And then we have the individual active options here. I think you'll see that MFS underperformed. A lot of that, it's a large cap growth fund. A lot of that's really their stock selection in tech and communication services, as well as an underweight to consumer discretionary, but they've had a very good trailing year and longer term rank very competitively versus peers and their benchmark. GW&K also underperformed in the third quarter. Most of that is really driven by some of their growthier parts of the portfolio. And we've seen value really take control, but they tend to not invest in biotech stocks. and healthcare to a degree, and in the third quarter that hurt their relative performance. Longer term performance continues to be very good. And then finally, I just highlight the TCW MetWest Total Return Bond Fund, which we highlight in the pension meeting, has underperformed over the trailing year, given the interest rate environment. But we still have conviction in that strategy, and certainly are not concerned there. And then finally, Invesco has performed well in a negative market environment, doing what it's supposed to do, providing a 1.5% return. And that share class change for both TCW and Invesco, as I mentioned, are in process and expected to take place in March. So I'll pause there. Happy to answer any questions on the DC plan.
Any questions?
No, looks good.
We're kind of on a glide path at the DC plan, I guess. You know, things look good. I guess Jerry is in here. I'm just curious if any more money is going into that fund, but I could email her later as far as anybody adding participants or anything like that. If there's nothing else,
Yeah, Frank, I think we're gonna invite Empower to the next DC meeting, and they'll be
Yes.
able to provide some good context into what's going on and who they're meeting with, and adding participants and everything like that.
if there's no other questions, then is there a motion for adjournment? We were gonna have next week, I mean, at our next meeting, you're gonna have ABS. We try to have ABS at the February meeting. Okay,
And when's the power coming in? That'd be the next quarter, right?
I think April is the next DC meeting, so we'll have
Yeah.
that in April.
Good.
perfect. Motion for adjournment,
So moved.
I'll second.
second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Thank you very much, everybody. Hope you all have a good rest of January.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Oh,
everybody.
and one other thing, by the way, I appreciate, Tina, that you're here because, you know, at first when I was getting an email from Tina and I'm going, who's Tina? But now we know who she is. She's up there at least on my screen, she's up there in the middle and she's very quiet and that's very nice. So
I'm taking notes and trying to learn about how you do your work, because while I have a slight understanding of pensions, it's not my wheelhouse. I'm an HR person, so that's why I figured I'd rather sit on these meetings and learn what you're doing, and so that way, if I do get a question later, maybe I'll have some iota of the ability to answer it.
And if you have any questions, you can contact me or Britt or any of us, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you or meet with you or whatever. Okay?
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right.
Everybody.
Thanks,
Good,
everyone.
everybody. Good
Take
night.
care.
Bye now.